Nutrition, fiction, fact, and crap, aka quackpots. Nutrition advice can be factual or craptual, and you need to know how to tell the difference. Your health span literally depends on it. And we all know that there are some things that certain powerful people do not want you to know, so it's really important that we talk about it. This is at least my third attempt on this subject. It's really hard to talk about nutrition because, if nothing else, there's so much information, both good and bad. And that makes it almost impossible to be succinct. So the only way this is going to work is for me to break it down into small bites and make a whole playlist on the subject. And despite the challenges of this topic, it has to be discussed. Diet has overtaken tobacco as the leading cause of early death. We're obviously getting things really wrong, but that's somewhat forgivable, partly because it's such a complex topic, and partly because there are so many conflicting opinions, conflicting data, competing motives, conflicting claims, and conflicting results from this or that diet or approach or lifestyle. And that's a good thing, actually. It's actually a good thing that there are so many people trying to fool you. But we'll get to that later. There's so much to say on this topic, and it's really fun. And there are a lot of really smart creators here making great content. YouTube has become an incredible archive of information, and so I'm so looking forward to all these topics and extrapolating some of the ideas that I'm going to introduce in this video. But I think we need to start out by acknowledging the fact that, well, it's bad enough that so many people are trying to sell you junk food, but take note. There are just as many trying to sell you junk science and junk diets and junk ideas. And therein lies the silver lining, but we're not quite ready for that. We will get there, I promise. There's so much screaming out there, and yes, so much static, which honestly is the inevitable result of all that junk information. I mean, even people who mostly agree will get hung up on the one detail where they disagree and get so heated. One thing I find really funny is that some of the most passionate and opinionated people are the ones who say nutrition doesn't matter at all. I mean, seriously, some of them are really militant about it and will lecture you on and on about how food is just food is just food is just food. Unfortunately, next to politics and religion, I can think of no other topic that can make people mad faster than nutrition. Everybody has their opinions, and they get really attached to those opinions. And before long, humility is out the door, discernment gives way to preconceptions, and we stonewall any ideas that challenge our opinions. First, eggs are good, then they're bad, then they're good again. Veggies are a poor source of nutrition, then they're loaded with micronutrients, then they're full of lectins, but then they have the fiber, and now the lectins aren't that bad, and no wonder we're a mess. Honestly, I fully wonder if I'm going to actually lose friends over this video, but you know, I gotta say what I gotta say, so here goes. If you're a real-life friend of mine, take that in for a moment, because by the end of this video, we might no longer be friends, so just enjoy it while you can. But who do you listen to? Who should you trust? Well, first of all, it's worth knowing and keeping in mind that nutrition is a really young science full of variables, conflicts of interest, and dubious funding sources, and it's hard to do definitive studies. In fact, it would be kind of unethical to conduct really solid studies. I mean, think about it. You would have to lock up a group of people and feed them a very tightly controlled and precise diet, and then lock up a control group and feed them nothing but junk food for like 30 years. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but not by that much. You just can't do that to people. Back in the day, before we had laws about that sort of thing, some people actually did do some studies that would be so illegal now. And we will actually look at some of the findings from those studies in future videos, but you really can't do that kind of thing anymore, and that's a good thing. So to a large degree, we're stuck with observational studies that might rely on people self-reporting their food habits, and let's face it, people don't always tell the truth. They don't always remember the truth. But correlation is not causality. That's the really important concept to take away here. Correlation is not causality. Here's an example. There was a study in the 70s that concluded that coffee causes lung cancer, which it absolutely does not, by the way. But they came to that conclusion because statistically, coffee drinkers of the time had a significantly higher incidence of lung cancer. Well, it turns out, duh, a lot of people back then really enjoyed a cigarette with their coffee because, well, let's admit it, coffee and cigarettes go kind of good together. But it wasn't the coffee that caused the cancer. It was the fact that coffee drinkers of the 70s tended to love cigarettes. So remember this because it bears repeating. Correlation is not causality. Coffee was firmly correlated with lung cancer, but it was not the cause. Coffee did not and still does not have a causal relationship with lung cancer. Another way I've heard it put is kind of darkly amusing. Suppose an alien is watching us here on Earth. They might conclude that ambulances cause car accidents. To them, it would make sense. Whenever you see a car accident, you see ambulances. So obviously, Okay, so one more time. Say it with me. Correlation is not causality. Okay, so back to the question, who do you trust? Well, let's start with the process of elimination and talk about some of the people you should probably be careful of. I'd start by saying that since nutrition is such a young science, and since it's hard to do really reliable studies, you might want to be careful of people who say things in absolute factual terms. I mean, listen to them, but be aware that people who know things and people who tell you the one thing that you need to know, people claiming to know things in such a young science but lack the humility to admit the possibility that we're still figuring this stuff out, it should make your bullshit meter bounce a little. And like the plague, avoid people who tell you this is the one thing that's going to save your life. The only one thing that will keep you alive is not dying. Another clue is follow the money. If you can, look up who pays for studies. There's one well-known diet out there that recommends a diet with a lot of dairy, but if you look at who funds them, you'll find a number of dairy associations. Now, it doesn't mean they're wrong or that they're lying, but it should make you question what motivates their message. It is well established and super important to remember that industry-funded science almost always reliably support the conclusion that they were paid to find. Studies on cigarettes that were funded by the tobacco industry concluded that cigarettes are harmless and non-addictive. Several oil industry-funded studies have concluded that the use of fossil fuels has no real impact on the climate. I don't love generalizations, generally. But here's one good one. Don't trust industry-funded science. And then there are people who don't take money directly from trade organizations, but do want you to buy their books and videos, attend their lectures, join their memberships, give them the attention they crave, watch their channels, and tell all your friends. And full disclosure, I want you to watch my channel and do all the algorithm things, like subscribe and share and all that stuff. So please do those things and call me a hypocrite if you will. Hey, who said that? Okay, but still, if you'd like to see more unbiased, useful information and perspective, if you'd like to continue to be part of the food conversation, then write what's on your mind in the comments. Hit the subscribe button, and if you want to never miss a beat in that conversation, hit the notifications button. And if you want to support helping people learn how to not get suckered in by the hucksters, then yes, indeed, hit the like button, because it sends the message that truth still matters. I want my channel to do well just like everybody else, but I'm going to do everything I can to make sure I provide reliable, useful information and perspective. At the end of the day, that's really what I'm in it for. Food can change the world, maybe even save the world. Don't believe me? Stay tuned. Be wary of the friend who switched to a certain diet and then lost a bunch of belly fat and got healthy. I mean, that's great. It really is. And I myself tell some similar stories about my own life. But remember that most people who switch up their eating habits are usually also making multiple changes to their lifestyle. Around the same time they adopted that diet, they also started exercising or meditating, or maybe that fad diet was at least an improvement from the junk diet they were eating before. They just generally started taking care of themselves. It may not have been that one thing. Diet may have played a crucial role in all that, but it might have been a whole regimen of choices. Just imagine if they told you the whole story. My health has been so much better ever since I started running, gave up fast food, started sleeping regularly, picked up some qigong and meditation, and stopped eating gluten. So obviously, it was the gluten. You know what? Really? It wasn't the exercise and the sleep and the relaxation of all those changes. It was the gluten? I mean, that's just not good science. Also, and this is important, everybody is different and everybody's body is different. What worked for them may or may not work for you, and it should be obvious that one person's alleged outcome is not hard science. And before you start scoffing at people who say they have a gluten intolerance, remember, it is actually a real thing. It's different from celiacs, and it really impacts about 6% of the population. It's not common, but it is real, and you have no idea about other people. Anyway, there are even studies that suggest a person's ethnicity might have an impact on how their body responds to food. One fun example is the old Mongolians under Genghis Khan. They were lactose tolerant, while some of their rivals, like the Jin Chinese, like most Asians, were lactose intolerant. That allowed the Mongols to consume the milk from the horses they were riding. They would also sometimes slip a little slab of horse meat under their saddle where the heat and friction would slowly cook it. So they were literally riding on the backs of their own pantry, and that gave them a huge advantage over the Jin, who, despite outnumbering the Mongols 10-1, fell in short order. The point is that some foods can be fine for one group, but for another group, well, not so much. Dairy is a really good example because some populations are fine with it while others are not. Being half Asian, I don't know if I'm lactose intolerant per se, but I do think that drinking a glass of milk is kind of just gross. I don't know, that's just me. It's not a hard, fast rule. It's just another part of the mix. Another person to be cautious with is the friend who insists that nutrition doesn't matter. You won't hear me say this very often, but that person is completely and definitively wrong, demonstrably wrong. What you eat matters. It matters a lot. If you don't believe me, try this. Go buy a box or maybe two of cookies, and on some afternoon where you don't have anything important to do, eat those cookies for lunch. Don't eat anything else. Eat the whole box, or if you have room, eat both boxes. If you're like most people, you're going to spend the rest of the afternoon feeling absolutely like crap, and maybe even into the next day. Why? Because food matters. If just this one meal made you feel crappy, just imagine what a lifetime of bad diet can do to a person. It matters. People who say food doesn't matter are not just wrong, they're demonstrably and tragically wrong. But for some reason, the people who think food doesn't matter are the most vehement. Why that is, I can only guess. But if I had to guess, I'd guess that it has a lot to do with the fact that there are so many hucksters out there peddling their BS, that it's easy to get to a point where you get tired of hearing it and tired of being lectured, and you finally get to a point where you want to reject the whole thing. It's actually understandable. I get tired of the hucksters too, but don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Sometimes the only way to come close to understanding the world is to hold two seemingly contrary ideas as both true. This might be one of those times. Bottom line, yes, a lot of people are trying to hornswoggle you with various diets, and it's also true that food matters. Okay, so who else should you be careful with? Well, people who say that you should eliminate too many things that we know are good for you. For me, I'm really suspicious of the people who say we shouldn't eat plants. Plants are really important. For one, you need fiber. You really, really need fiber, and you can't get it from animals. Plants are also loaded with disease-fighting polyphenols and pigments and other secondary metabolites that are nearly impossible to replace through a carnivore diet. You are built to eat plants. It's in your biological history, and it's in your biological biology. Yes, I know you see a lot of smart-looking people who wear lab coats and wear glasses and use big words who are more than willing to explain to you that they know the reason you feel like crap. But just remember, lies can be told with long words too. Long, scientific-sounding words from smart-looking people in lab coats and glasses and videos with really slick, science-y B-roll. But weirdly, it seems like they often list the same symptoms that they claim they can cure. Bloating, constipation, irritable bowel, brain fog, headaches, and a cadre of usual suspects. All real and unfortunate things for sure, and sadly, some of those are common symptoms of some very serious conditions like long COVID or anemia or brain injuries, which I do not want to trivialize in any way, and I'm definitely not a doctor, but if you have bloating, constipation, diarrhea, or other issues in your gut, the first thing you might want to fix is your gut biome. I'm not going to promise that that's the solution for everybody, but most people do have insufficient gut flora. It's a good starting point. And more on that later, but here's your fun fact for the day. There are more novel genes in a healthy gut than there are stars in the known universe. and that's how it should be. Be careful of extreme diets. Be careful of people who want something from you, or people who seek to have control over others. Be careful of people who are overly attached to being right or defensive and want to appear to be smart. Be careful of people who give you clever, tidy little answers to complex questions or substitute wordplay for wisdom. Be careful of people who take money from trade organizations. Now, there are some truisms out there that, while not perfect, can lead you in the right direction. Eat different colors, shop the perimeter, avoid processed food, try to cook for yourself from whole, real ingredients, and my personal favorite, it all comes back to leafy greens. We'll look at those ideas in more detail in other videos, and I think it's worth remembering the sage advice of one of the greatest, most respectable food gurus of all time, Michael Pollan, who said it so well: eat real food, not too much, mostly plants. And seriously, the guy's a genius. I highly recommend all of his books. There are so many diets out there, but if you have one that you're really interested in, or if there's just something you think I should know about or study, please mention it in the comments and we'll unpack it. Like I said in my trailer, this is a conversation and I'm learning along with you. I love this topic, but suffice to say, I question a lot of the so-called information floating around out there. It's better to learn about how nutrition works, learn how your body works, make your own plan, and most of all, trust your own body. In my flavor video, I talked about Nutritive Reward. In short, your body has ways of telling you what foods are good for you, and learning how to speak that language can be extremely helpful. Nutritive Reward, or something like it, is probably the most important tool I use in guiding my food choices. And if you haven't yet, I strongly suggest that you watch my video on flavor because it dives a little deeper into that subject. Plus, it's just a really fun and informative video. Now, you have to be careful with this one, but there's pretty solid reason to believe that your body already knows what it needs, and it will try to communicate that to you via cravings. Now, it doesn't mean you cave into every notion that you want a junk burger or beer or ice cream. You have to temper those signals with common sense, which begins with learning some basic nutrition. In other words, keep watching this playlist, hint, hint. But you need to learn how to tell when your cravings are being affected by other conditions. But if you apply some good information to your body's signals, I really believe that you can do a great job of feeding yourself. You just have to learn to do it smart, though. Learn about nutrition and learn how to read your body's signals. Think of it as a kind of informed intuition. You kind of follow what might seem like an intuitive feeling, but you inform and support it with learned wisdom. It's the marriage between book learning and gut instinct. In fact, I think this concept is really important. So the first person to type the words informed intuition in the comments field will get this awesome Eat As Love apron. Perfect for wearing while you make all those healthy, delicious, yummy foods. Easy, right? Type informed intuition, be the first one, and get this apron. Well, not this exact apron, because I'm using this one as a prop, but an apron very much like this one. It's very special, and so are you. So you're going to be really perfect together. Okay, so the silver lining good news I promised you, here it is. There are so many people trying to sell you on their BS, not just in the food world, but in the world in general. We all know the shadow side of the information age has turned out to be bad information, junk science, fake news, and all that. So use nutrition as your practice ground. Learn how to recognize and sniff out the hucksters. Once you learn how to recognize them, their language, their tricks, and even their facial expressions and cliches, once you learn to do that in the food arena, you'll be all the better equipped to sniff them out in the rest of your life. Let me put it another way. This might be a little droll, but I'll keep it short. Context is the precursor to perspective. Perspective is the first step of discernment. Context, perspective, informed intuition, balanced apprehension, humility, wisdom, flexibility, and observation lead to truth. If you can learn to apply that to food, you can apply it to everything else in life. And thanks to the food hucksters, you will have an improved capacity for discernment. See? I told you food was about everything. It all comes down to leafy greens. I have so much more that I really want to share with you, so I'm looking forward to making more videos on this topic. It's going to be so fun. But in the meantime, stay here on YouTube, look around and listen to what other creators are saying. You can only get smarter. In future videos, we'll take a closer look at some of the popular diets, fad foods, and food myths. Now, it seems like it's been easier to tell you who not to believe than it is to tell you who to believe. Same way it's easier sometimes to speak in terms of what not to eat. So let me sum it up this way. First of all, educate yourself. Learn about the macronutrients, and then take a little more time to drill deeper and learn about things like secondary metabolites and fiber and phytochemicals and polyphenols. You don't need a PhD, but this is your health and your one and only body at stake. It's worth learning how to take care of it, and it's worth learning how to listen to it. Secondly, learn how to spot bullshit. Don't believe people who try to feed it to you, and do not under any circumstances ever swallow it figuratively or literally. It's very bad for you. Got it? Get it? Good. Ciao.